future anti-Semitic congressperson. There's no ejection to remove her from foreign affairs committees. This is just a placebo.
This isn't a bad day. This has been her record when she was in the State House, all the way up until she got this job a couple of months ago. And look what Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, knowing he doesn't have the votes to condemn this because so many freshmen are sticking by her, he says, oh, let's broaden this out. Quote, we are committed to decisively condemning anti-Semitism, racism, white supremacy, Islamophobia, homophobia, and the rise of hate that has taken place in this country, perhaps coincidentally over the last 2 years. In other words, let's blame Trump for this. So what do you think about how he's taken responsibility or lack thereof?
So anti-Semitism is a genocidal hatred unlike any other. It led to the greatest crime against humanity. I agree. I condemn all xenophobia of any kind. Anti-Semitism is different. I'm astonished that they're going to include the word Islamophobia. Everyone should know Islamophobia is not anti-Muslim xenophobia. That is violence against somebody, hatred against someone for their Muslim personhood. Islamophobia is invented by a post-revolutionary Iran to shut down scrutiny of Islamists, of radical Islam, of any institution, entity, person. They put that in there. She just got more powerful because she can say the same remarks again. Oh, I'm criticizing Israel. If you attack me, you're being Islamophobic. So now the rules will change. There's no debate according to secular liberal democracy. The debate is on the terms of the pro-Islamist attitudes. I do think the Democratic leadership, many of my friends are Jewish Democrats, are absolutely heartbroken. There was real anti-Semitism, not just
Eliot Engel, for one.
Yes.
He's chairman of the department. He's the one who called it a vile anti-Semitic slur. This is Democrat on Democrat.
It's not just slurs, Brian. She's affiliated with boycott, divestment, sanctions. That is a militant anti-Semitic movement disguised as a human rights movement, which calls essentially for the eradication of Israel. She went and keynoted for Islamic Relief, which is sanctioned by the Swedish government. Tunisia, Bangladesh will not have Islamic Relief do refugee work with the Rohingyas because they're afraid of radicalization. Her actions, other than her words, point to Islamist anti-Semitism. The Democrats, thank you for condemning anti-Semitism. That's what we do at the Shoah Foundation. We combat it. But they are not exposing the real problem. And she is unfit to be on a foreign affairs committee.
Why are they defending her now? At first, they were condemning her. Nancy Pelosi was defending her, condemning her. All of my Jewish friends were excited that the Democrats, the leadership, were condemning her comments.
Yes.
And now it looks like they're walking that back. They're supporting her, and the Democratic Party is divided. They're watering down this legislation or this resolution.
I can only think two things. Democratic leadership at the apex, Speaker Pelosi or our own Senator Chuck Schumer, are afraid, that's one, that there will be some consequences for rendering this woman's ideas pariah. Remember, this is not about her color, her veil, her race. This is about her ideas. And the other is, how much of the Democratic Party really subscribes to these views? Do they think this is going to be the basis? Right. That is a concern.
They're pushing to say questioning the Israeli foreign policy is not anti-Semitic.
So
by the way, with the 23 Middle Eastern countries there's one democracy that stands by us through decades. It is Israel. Why they go out of their way all the time to question Israel is beyond me.
Not only standing by the United States, but Israel provides religious plurality and freedom for Muslims and non-Jews in Israel.
Absolutely.
Criticizing Israel can be legitimate, but unifying, making it one entity, vilifying it on terms other than any other country, that is anti-Semitism.
All right, Dr. Ahmed, thank you so much.
Appreciate it. A lot to discuss. All right, straight ahead. Stunning new numbers on the crisis at the border, but Democrats doing everything they can to downplay it.
The president shut down the government and declared a border emergency, an emergency that does not exist.
What does President Obama's former Border Patrol chief, Mark Morgan, think? It might surprise you. That's next.
And why did this grandpa do the chicken dance? It's no joke. And the answer will make your day. Stick around for that story, the story behind that video.
For migrants, it undermines our nation's values, and it fails to uphold our fundamental obligations to the American people. Although we may disagree on solutions, I hope there can be a consensus that the current system isn't working and that this is an emergency.
And that's why she was there, to try to get some consensus. Let's bring in Mark Morgan. He's the former Border Patrol chief under President Obama. You saw Kristen Nielsen yesterday. She's trying to explain that there is an emergency on our southern border. The Democrats are having no part of it. What's the truth?
Well, just listen to what she says. And then also the commissioner of CBP, Kevin McElhaney, the current chief of the United States Border Patrol, they've all provided congressional testimony within the last few days.
And facts.
And facts. I was just going to say that. You're absolutely right, Brian. So not only, I mean, how did the secretary start off her testimony? There's a national emergency or crisis. And then she backed it up with facts. The commissioner did the same thing. The current chief, Carla Provost, did the same thing.
Mark, you say the policies are in place from President Obama. Same policies. We're just enforcing them differently. How is President Trump doing it differently than President Obama did?
So that's exactly right. And that's a misnomer, another false narrative. There's many laws already on the book. Like, for example, what he's trying to do right now in the San Diego sector, where he is not allowing those individuals that are seeking asylum to just be brought into the United States, never to be heard from again. He's saying, no, you stay in Mexico, file your asylum claim, and then when your hearing's ready, we'll bring you in and adjudicate that.
You told me something in the green room that I think is really important. The things that's changed over the last 10 years is that there used to be Mexicans coming over the border and we'd send 90% back. Now it's not Mexicans because we changed our policy, and now it's Central Americans and basically 65 to 70%.
In hours, they were adult Mexicans. Now we're on track this year to reach another million. The problem is 65 to 75% of them are going to be released in the United States.
Yesterday, Ranking Member Mike Rogers on the committee, he's a Republican from Alabama, he said, we never argued about whether borders worked until Donald Trump wanted them. This is not rocket scientists. So the Republicans say it's a crisis, and as you're about to see, the Democrats say, really?
Have you given him the grounds for this emergency declaration in the context of what emergency means?
They've given him all the facts from the men and women working at the border. By my read of it, it is an emergency. It is a dual crisis.
The president shut down the government and declared a border emergency, an emergency that does not exist. Real border security cannot be achieved by building a wall on the southern border, blocking asylum seekers, or separating children from their parents.
They also were talking about the cages. They asked her, are children put in cages? What's your response to that were built during the Obama administration?
Right, and that's it's totally a false narrative. It's a talking point for the Democrats. They're not cages. They're actually really nice facilities. And there are chain link fence within the facilities, but it's designed so the Border Patrol agents working there can provide safety and security for the people that are there. And remember, they're only there for max 72 hours before they've got to be released.
So you have the humanitarian crisis, with both sides are seeing is a problem. The New York Times wrote about it. You have the drug problem. 80% of all illegal drugs coming through our ports of entry in the South, and stuff that we'll never know because we don't see it. So if we can agree on that much, don't you think there's time for both sides to get together and solve this problem and do it almost in the way we did criminal justice reform? And don't you think it's possible?
Congress could fix the majority of the issue in 15 minutes, but they refuse to. It's identity politics.
They don't want to give Donald Trump a win.
Look, from a law enforcement perspective, Steve, I can come to no other conclusion. The facts are overwhelming. How many more do you need?
Right, and you was there during the Obama years.
Mark,
the last year
why are you speaking out? If you represent President Obama, why do you disagree with what's happening now?
Because the president's right. President Trump is right. It's that simple.
Right.
We have a crisis.
Right, and you don't necessarily represent President Obama. You just served this last year. You wanted to stick around, but the Border Patrol's decided they're going to put their own person in there.
Right, and that's okay.
Right.
All right.
Right.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the couch.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks
Mark,
for your
Jillian,
service.
Yes. Jillian's behind you, and she has some headlines for us. Hey,
Good
Jillian.
morning. Good morning to everyone. Let's start off with this story that we're following. The Air Force is responding after Senator Martha McSally reveals she was sexually assaulted by a superior officer in the military.
I stayed silent for many years, but later in my career, as the military grappled with scandals and their wholly inadequate responses, I felt the need to let some people know I, too, was a survivor.
An Air Force spokesperson saying in part, quote, "We are appalled and deeply sorry for what Senator McSally experienced, and we stand behind her and all victims of sexual assault." A Bible will stay on display at a VA hospital after a so-called bully tried removing it. A lawyer for the First Liberty Institute telling Fox News, quote, if he wants to remove that display or any part of it, he's going to have to come through us. The group standing up after the leader of another group objected because it promoted one faith over another. The Bible was given to the New Hampshire VA hospital by a former prisoner. All right, you got to stop what you're doing and watch this. A semi-truck slams into a construction worker. Did you see that? Who was hanging above the road fixing a stoplight in Houston. Yeah, a driver's dash cam capturing the big rig plowing through at nearly 50 miles per hour. The construction bucket flipping upside down, leaving the man dangling above a busy highway. The semi-driver stopped and called 911 as crews got the man down. He is in stable condition. Lucky man. When a 4-year-old gets nervous at her cheerleading competition, her grandpa knows exactly what to do. That's Jeff Harville doing the chicken dance with McKinley Lester in Tennessee. She told her mom she wanted her pawpaw to dance with her when she got stage fright. Isn't that adorable?
The things you do for your kids, your grandkids, right?
I need Grandpa, and there he was. Luckily, he knew the chicken dance, kind of.
Well, I need Janice Dean because I got to find out the weather. Should I wear shorts today? I have no idea.
I don't know, but I'm coming over to your place later on because I'm in Huntington for
Wait a second.
book signing.
Book review in Huntington?
Yes, and Brian Kilmeade even put a sign up. So come to book review. We're going to be doing a book signing of Mostly Sunny, and it's going to be wonderful. You guys are from Texas, ladies. What part?
Nocona.
And what are your names?
Alpine and Amanda Lujan.
I'm very sorry that it's cold outside right now. But it's cold in Texas. Let's take a look at the maps, and I'll show you how cold it is across the country. We are dealing with a 7 right now. That's the wind chill, by the way. In North Texas, it feels like 50. Still, that's warmer, and I would prefer to be in North Texas. Looking at the west where another storm is moving in, and we will continue to track that over the next couple of days. All right, you want to come to Long Island with me, ladies?
Sure.
All right, let's go. We're going to go to dinner first with Brian Kilmeade at his home.
Right.
It's going to be nice.
My complex.
Fantastic.
So look for Janice Dean tonight at Bookends in...
Book review.
Book review.
Book review.
That's
right. Every major book goes through Book Review, a great independent bookstore right at one of the best towns in America.
Fantastic.
Yeah, a big crowd out there, Janice.
Yep.
Mostly Sunny. All right. Meanwhile, the Democratic Socialist from New York has a list of moderate Democrats who don't embrace socialism. 2020 presidential hopeful John Delaney might be on it, and he says he doesn't care. He's going to join us live.
Plus, a judge just ruled that an aborted child has the same rights as a person. What does this mean for
an unborn child as a person with legal rights, potentially opening up a brand new chapter in this country's abortion debate?
There's a guy, Ryan Majors. He's 19 years old, or was when his girlfriend was pregnant, now being allowed to sue an abortion clinic for terminating his unborn child against his wishes. He says that the baby died a wrongful death after his girlfriend, who was 16 at the time, had an abortion when she was 6 weeks pregnant.
All right, on Tuesday, an Alabama judge recognized the aborted fetus, quote, Baby Roe, as a plaintiff in the lawsuit. Here to react, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, this must have taken you by surprise, too, right?
It did take me by surprise because the Supreme Court, regrettably, in Roe versus Wade, which is still the law of the land, has said that the fetus is not a person. Now, what's the significance of personhood? The Fifth Amendment says if the government wants life, liberty, or property from a person, there has to be a trial. So if the fetus in the womb is a person, no legal abortion could happen because you'd have to prove that somehow the fetus in the womb did something wrong. For that reason, as horrific as this logic is, Roe versus Wade has said the fetus is not a person. That's why, regrettably, this courageous move by this Alabama judge will eventually be overturned.
But Roe v. Wade is wrong in the definition of a person, because if a child is born, children are born all the time, a month, 2 months prematurely, and they are a person.
Steve, I've been arguing.
Isn't it wrong?
I agree with you. but to Roe versus Wade until it is interfered with by the court as the supreme law of the land. I've been arguing for 40 years that the fetus in the womb is a person. The fetus has human parents and all the human genome necessary to actualize into humanity. But Roe versus Wade is to the contrary. But let me tell you what this Alabama judge, this courageous Alabama judge, whom I don't know and have never met, succeeded in doing. Teeing up this issue so that there is a debate about the personhood of the fetus. And why is that important? Because in some states, like where we are now, where abortion is legal up to the moment of birth, a baby that survives the abortion is permitted to die. The doctor is permitted to neglect that baby and let the baby. Correct.
Something we haven't talked about too. This is the boyfriend, the man. Normally, the man can't sue if the woman gets an abortion because it's the woman's body.
You're 100% correct, and you're thinking logically. The courts don't think that way. The courts say the father doesn't have the right to interfere with the abortion. That's an obstacle to the woman's choice.
Can't you still have abortion and define a person before birth?
No, because if the fetus is a person, you cannot kill a person without a jury trial. And that jury trial, you'd have to prove fault. But all of this is bubbling to the head so that the horrors of what happens when babies survive abortions will eventually be addressed by the courts.
And you know what the MVP for the abortion debate is? The 3D sonogram. That's bringing these babies to life at an earlier time every day.
You are so good, Kilmeade. Only you could call this an MVP.
Right. I'm trying.
Most valuable person. That's what we're talking about.
We'll see you on your show today, right? Is it?
Yes. Oh, my goodness. We have Senator Mike Braun from Indiana who says Congress should not be getting pensions, Congress should not be getting pay raises, and they shouldn't get paid when the government's
Liberty
closed.
File on the Fox Nation
at
app.
9:30 Fox Nation. Thank you, Brian.
Meanwhile, we did reach out to the Alabama Women's Center for Reproductive Alternatives in Huntsville. They have not responded. All right, Judge, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Misdemeanor charge. Michael Knowles is the host of The Michael Knowles Show and joins us now to react. Michael, thank you for being with us. Why aren't the Democrats, why are they so silent on this?
Well, the trouble is, this particular guy is obviously a wacko. He's a thug. He's got a long history of this. The trouble for the Democrats and for the left is that he is emblematic of a larger problem. This isn't the first time this has happened at Berkeley. This is a problem all over the country. The issue is the left redefining speech as violence.
Well, what do you make of the president at CPAC, where he pulled the fellow who was attacked up on stage, and then he said essentially that he was going to come up with some sort of executive order pulling federal funding from colleges that don't support free speech?
This is very important. The William F. Buckley Jr. program at Yale did a survey. 81% of college students believe that speech can be a form of violence. And so what do you do to this form of violence? Either you
turn
censor
it off.
Yeah, you turn it off. It justifies violence against conservatives. And we saw this 2 years ago at UC Berkeley. Eric
Where
Clanton,
you speak all the time.
That's right. Yeah, they love having me there. At Berkeley, Eric Clanton, this community college professor, hit conservatives over the head with a bike lock. And what happened to him? 3 years probation. And so President Trump at CPAC, he said, well, is there going to be justice served here? We'll have to wait and see.
And you know what they're saying? This goes all the way up to the freshman class in Congress. Their intolerant way of disrespecting their own leadership. They created this monster. Now they can't control it.
There is a little schadenfreude here when you see this generational shift among Democrats in Congress. And I think, unfortunately, they thought as a tactic, they could hurt conservatives to define speech as violence, to censor people, and now they're seeing the fruit of that ideological poison.
Do you think the president was right to bring him on stage, the victim, and point him out at CPAC?
Absolutely. This is so important. We've known this for a long time, that politics is downstream of culture. President Trump made a key aspect of his campaign stopping political correctness, stopping censorship, stopping violence for speech. And if we don't get that fixed, we're not going to fix any of our other political problems.
Well, on the good side, Berkeley did come out and said that the attack was reprehensible.
Good.
Take up a few days. What great consolation. Okay, I guess we're all fine now, huh?
It did take a while, but at least they got the guy.
All right. Michael, thank you very much.
Good to see you.
Heading back to California now.
I'm hitting the plane.
All right, good luck to you. All right, still ahead on our Thursday telecast. Eric Trump, son of the president, John Bolton.
This is truly an emergency.
Your oath to the American people, your oath to...
I just want you to admit that the cages exist.
Sir, they're not cages.
But in her testimony, Nielsen painted a troubling picture of what's to come.
The projections are dire. At the current pace, we are on track to encounter close to 1 million illegal aliens at our southern border this year. Our capacity is already severely restrained, but these increases will overwhelm the system entirely. This is not a manufactured crisis. This is truly an emergency.
After the hearing, I confronted Chairman Thompson regarding his non-emergency assertion. He had visited the border in El Paso at the same time I was in Juarez. Here is what he had to say.
I look at what the numbers say. At that time, the numbers were down. If we would do what the system requires to be done, then I think we can accommodate it. But when we create situations where the law doesn't allow for it to be created, it's a manufactured crisis.
Here's the problem with that. The numbers. He says it was down when, in fact, according to the numbers we released and reported here yesterday, apprehensions for family units in El Paso is up 1,689% from this time last year. I pressed him specifically on that as well, and he walked away. Guys?
There you go. All right, Griff, thank you very much. Let's bring in Michelle Malkin, syndicated columnist and author as well, and she joins us today. Michelle, yesterday we had Sarah Sanders on, and she said in February alone, 76,000 people were apprehended as they came into our country. She said it's the same as MetLife Stadium, which is just across the river over in New Jersey. When you think about that,
in 1 month,
if you had a stadium full of people every month, that's over 1 million. That's approaching 1 million people, as we just heard from the expert yesterday.
Yeah, we're talking about populations of cities now. Where are they going to go? You know, where's the detention space for these people, let alone the fact that they're just going to be turned out and let loose into the country? These are future Democrat voters who are never going to budge from the left. It is an electoral crisis for the Republican Party as well.
Do we have a social safety net for the people of Guatemala or El Salvador or the people of America, which is already overtaxed? 87% of the people apprehended coming here illegally from Central America don't go through the port of entry. That's why you need a barrier. So in terms of what Democrats and Republicans are looking to act on, they both are beginning to agree on a humanitarian crisis. So it shows a little bit of progress. Nancy Pelosi is quoted this way, says, I don't just...
that's about our next one.
Yeah, that's about our next one. But in particular, you cannot get leadership on the Democratic side to go along with this. But you did see some breaking over the course of 3 hours because these apprehension numbers are hardcore facts. There's no opinion in them.
Yeah, well, the Democrats have talked out of both sides of their mouths for years now on the need for border security. We need smart border security, dumb Nancy Pelosi says. You know what? All of this argues for is for President Trump to take executive action and simply shut it down. And the magnet is still untouched here of asylum. That's what's drawing these families. They know that they will be caught and then released into the country if they simply make a false claim of credible persecution.
Michelle, let's talk about Ilhan Omar, the freshman congresswoman. There was a House resolution that was meant to prevent anti-Semitism after some of the comments that she made. It looks like now Nancy Pelosi is bowing now to the radicals. They're all changing their tunes. She's saying that it was not intentionally anti-Semitic. And then she says this, I don't think this is just about comments by Congresswoman Omar, which I do not think were intentionally anti-Semitic. Why the change of tune? They were condemning her at first, and now they're putting new language in this resolution that might not even pass.
Yeah, Nancy Pelosi fears the radical left, and the fringe has become the center of the Democrat Party. This is proof of it. Just a couple of weeks ago, before Ilhan Omar made even worse anti-Semitic comments, Nancy Pelosi was condemning her, right? She said, we should not be engaging in disseminating anti-Semitic tropes. That's an exact quote. And so what did Ilhan Omar do? She put even more of those tropes out there, and now Nancy Pelosi's argument is that this is inadvertent anti-Semitism, inadvertent hate.
It's an
Can you
insult.
imagine if Republicans made this argument that oopsie, that it was accidental racism and anti-Semitism? It's flabbergasting.
Well, Michelle, when you look at how the Republicans handled some extraordinary comments made by Steve King, the Republican from Iowa, about white supremacy, they kicked him off all of his committees. And now Republicans are saying, hey, there's a double standard here. You've got this freshman member of the incoming class, and she has said some things that deserve to get her kicked off the committees, and yet Nancy Pelosi is standing by her.
Yeah, well, I think there is a double standard. I know Steve King. I know him a long time. He is a good man. And I think that he was thrown under the bus by people who made knee-jerk assessments about the New York Times, which is essentially an anti-Republican, anti-conservative organ. And so, yes, you can talk about double standards here. But, let's talk about another double standard. The fact that Governor Northam, Mr. Blackface, moonwalking Michael Jackson impersonator, is still in office out of all of this time. So, and let me talk about something else, which is that President Trump is the strongest defender of Israel, and yet he continues to be subjected to attacks by the SPLC and others that he is anti-Semitic. It's absolutely absurd. And I think if Nancy Pelosi continues down this path, karma is going to come back at her, because this Ilhan Omar is obviously beyond control. And if you think that she's going to be reined in after this, you're kidding yourself.
Has she lost control of the Democratic Party, Nancy Pelosi?
She absolutely has. Like I said, the fringe has become the center of the Democrat Party. And you look at the field of candidates for the Democrat presidential nomination, and who are they all backing? Ilhan Omar.
Yeah, they're all spineless. And so far, she's lost total control of the party. They're also moving ahead on impeachment. And she told the party, not yet, we're not ready, as did other chairmen of other committees. But they're going ahead and they're going to offer it sometime this month. Michelle Malkin, thanks so much.
Thanks, Michelle.
You bet. Take care.
Okay, Jillian has some headlines for us. Hey, Jillian.
That's right. Good morning. Let's start with this. And all of the missing people from that deadly Alabama tornado are now accounted for. Today, 2 of the 23 victims will be put to rest. Take a look. These wooden crosses set up to memorialize their lives as anonymous donors pledge to pay for all.
Know people with cancer. Most of us know someone with pancreatic cancer, and the survival rate is not good. Why is that?
It's because it's deep in the body, Ainsley, and by the time you know about it, it can be very far advanced, as in Alex Trebek's case. You don't get warning signs. You may eventually get yellow eyes or lose weight or get back pain. By the time that happens, it's at least 50% of the time already advanced. And we're just starting to really figure it out and to learn treatments for it. There's something coming out that's called Precision Promise this year, where people are going to get into clinical trials. We're going to figure out their genetic signatures. Everybody has a different kind of cancer. We're going to personalize treatments. That's going to start to make a difference, but it's really just the beginning. It's a very, very tough diagnosis.
Most men and women after a certain age have their annual physicals, and we test for things like this. Can this be tested for?
There's some proteins, but not yet where we can really tell, unless we're doing a CAT scan on everyone, which we're not going to do. But we have warning signs. People that smoke are at risk. People that drink too much that are at risk. People that are overweight, that have family histories. These are the people we're really looking at to see if they could be at risk. Now, I also believe, of course, as Alex Trebek, very positive attitude. I believe in the power of prayer in a situation like this.
Yeah, I mean, 3% of those diagnosed with pancreatic cancer survive more than 5 years, right? So they're 3%. Numbers are low, but someone's got to survive.
Well, if you catch it early, you can actually do a curative surgery. But again, catching it early is very, very hard. I believe in medical miracles, in mind over matter. And I'll tell you one thing, with his attitude, he's at very least, studies have shown, going to stay healthy for a lot longer than if he wasn't looking at it this way. I want to get those I want to get those 3 years in, he says, and I wouldn't bet against him. I think that power of positive thinking and prayer really helps a lot.
What was your reaction when you heard this news?
Well, I was shocked, as everyone was, because he looked so healthy. But of course, this is how it happens. One day you're fine, and the next day, bam, you have a death sentence. And I'll tell you, it's a wake-up call for everyone out there to enjoy their lives, to get everything possibly positive they can, to love each other, and to never take anything for granted.
On average, how long do someone with stage 4 pancreatic cancer have to live?
Unfortunately, it's only a matter of a year and a half usually. That's on average. It can be less, it can be more, but that's a very, very tough sentence to get. It's one of our worst cancers, one of our most deadly, but there's an incredible amount of effort going into it right now to say, where are the mutations? How can I target this? Can immunotherapy work? Can genetic treatment work? Things we've had great advances for other cancers, we're finally starting to bring into play for pancreatic cancer, and I predict, and as you pointed out, we're going to be able to diagnose it earlier. We're going to get better tests for finding the abnormal proteins. 5 years from now, even 3 years from now, we're going to be having a different discussion about this.
All right. Well, we hope that he's going to continue to work. We all watch Jeopardy. It's just something we have on in the house all the time.
And he's done a lot, Ainsley, with charitable Christian organizations, World Vision, around the world, USO. I mean, for the military.
He's a good man.
He's a good man.
All right. Well, God bless him. If you're a prayer, remember him in your prayers today. Thanks, Dr.
Thanks,
Siegel.
Ainsley.
National Security Advisor John Bolton will join us live coming up. Plus, the Democratic Socialist from New York has a list of moderate Democrats who don't embrace socialism.
Heading to the House floor, Democrats just helped vote the bill out of committee. The federal minimum wage is currently $7.25, so it was almost double. Next, 390. That's how many stores Family Dollar is closing this year. They blame it on slow holiday sales and falling Dollar Tree stocks since their merger in 2015. Family Dollar is also rebranding 200 stores as Dollar Tree. Look for that. And finally, $0. That's how much you can get a Frosty or Junior Bacon Cheeseburger for at Wendy's. This is too good to be true. Fast food chain is offering the freebies on their mobile app through March the 16th. You just need to buy one thing off the menu, and then you either get the Frosty or the Junior Bacon Burger. At Wendy's, Brian.
All right, Steve, we'll focus on that later. For now, let's talk politics. As the politics move left, and has so many in the Democratic side move to that left, I'm joined by a 2020 presidential candidate who says socialism is not the answer. Former Maryland Congressman and self-made success story, John Delaney, joins us right now. John, great to see you.
Great. Thanks for having me, Brian.
What made you want to run?
I think the central issue facing this country is how divided we are. So I want to be the president that brings us together, starts solving problems, and lays out a vision for the kind of future we can build together. And that's why I'm running for president.
When you have Cory Booker and Kamala Harris, when you have Bernie Sanders, all talking about the need for more spending, more social programs, and Bernie Sanders embracing socialism, does John Delaney embrace socialism?
I don't embrace socialism. I think the genius of America in many ways is that we've embraced capitalism and all of its power to innovate and create jobs, but we moderated it with strong social programs, right? So I think it's a bit of a false choice. And what we haven't done in the last several decades, in my opinion, is build the kind of programs we need to ensure that capitalism really serves the interest of all Americans. And that's what we have to get back to. We don't have to throw our model out the window. We just have to, in many ways, recommit to our model, which is letting capitalism innovate. Right? It's the greatest innovation machine ever, but also making sure that our citizens are prepared for the disruptive effect of capitalism, whether that be the social safety net, investing in our public schools so they get the kind of education they need to succeed in a world that's changing.
Governor Hickenlooper might be in your lane, maybe in some issues Amy Klobuchar. Everybody else is way left, and a lot of them are taking their cues from the author of the new Green Deal, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She says this: I didn't say they were putting themselves on a list for primaries when she was asked about, if you don't start going along with some of my programs, I'm going to put you on a list and primary you. I'm going to be breaking off with procedural voters. They were inadvertently making targets and advocates of pro-ICE vote. So she is somebody who's saying if you're for ICE, if you don't go along with the program, that she's going to look to get people together to primary you. You're not in Congress anymore, but you be a candidate to be primaried.
Well, I do think getting rid of ICE is bad policy. Right. So I can't really comment on what's going on in the House now. I'm not in the House anymore. I didn't run for re-election so that I could dedicate myself fully.
But you know that has a lot to do with the party. Kamala Harris said the same thing.
But I think the party obviously is we're kind of going through a big discussion. My sense is the Democratic Party, when I go and talk to voters, right, I've done 24 trips to Iowa, New Hampshire. Or 24 to Iowa, 14 to New Hampshire. When I talk to voters on the ground there, they're not nearly as divided as people think they are. In fact, in Iowa, they just did a poll 2 weeks ago, and they asked Iowa caucus goers, Democratic caucus goers, do you want a nominee who will work with Republicans and get things done, or do you want someone who will stick rigidly to their ideological beliefs? It was 86-4. That tells you where the primary voters
And
are.
I agree with you. And also, you could say
That's where Americans are.
You could say where the Tea Party pushed Republicans 8 years ago. You could say many on the left are pushing Democrats now. When you see some of the so-called front runners with the biggest names who say free preschool, free college, and make statements like Senator Elizabeth Warren when she came out and said the rich are freeloaders.
Well,
you are a self-made success story. Are you a freeloader?
Listen, I'm self-made in one context, but I'm also not self-made in other ways, right? You know, my dad was an electrician. His union paid for me to go to college, or gave me a scholarship to go to college, right? So a bunch of electricians helped me go to college, right? So in many ways, no one is really self-made in this country. I used to drive home from the Capitol every day to my house in Maryland, cross the Memorial Bridge, look out at Arlington Cemetery, and then that reminds you that we're all in this together, the sacrifices some people have made. But some of those are good policies. Listen, pre-K, universal pre-K, which I support, that's actually smart policy. And in many ways, it's conservative policy. Because kids who get pre-K, if you look at how they perform across the rest of their educational experience, it's the best investment we make.
But, John, that's fine. But you want Washington deciding what should be done in North Dakota pre-K?
I would like Washington to create incentives for North Dakota to offer pre-K, right? Washington can't tell North Dakota to offer pre-K, but they can create incentives for North Dakota to create universal pre-K. That's the way you do it.
The Washington Post, Jenna Rubin, does a column and calls you the smartest candidate, the smartest presidential candidate that you've never heard of. What's your reaction to that?
Well, we got to work on the second half. Right.
But you like the first half.
Well, you know, listen, I think Jennifer Rubin is a very astute columnist. We had a great conversation. We talked about issues. Right? She asked me what I think of the fiscal trajectory of the country. I told her. We talked about what we should do about climate change, which I think we should innovate our way out of the problem.
So you don't think we should? You don't think we should make cows old news for get rid of planes?
I think we should put a tax on carbon. Right, and I introduced the only bipartisan carbon tax bill in the Congress. We put a tax on carbon, and we take all the money and we give it back to the American people. So it changes behavior. And then what I want to do is invest in innovation. Because we can innovate our way out of this problem, just the same way we have innovated our way out of so many other problems.
I guess it depends how you do it. When you see Solyndra, you as a businessman must be a little taken aback.
But here's an example, like negative emissions technologies. And this is something you guys should be talking about. These are machines that actually take carbon out of the atmosphere.
Right.
They exist today. The problem is they're really expensive. If we created a market for them,
to do that.
Just like we did with wind and solar. You know how the prices came down because we created a market?
Right.
If we do the same thing with this, the American economy will innovate our way out of this problem.
A plus.
That won't last long.
Yeah, it's early. Hey, let's go down to the White House. John Bolton, the White House National Security Advisor, joins us live where it's a little on the chilly side. John, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Glad to be with you.
Hey, what's going on with North Korea? It looks like, according to satellite imagery, like they're rebuilding something. And that's not good, the president says.
Right. He said yesterday he was very, very disappointed about it. He said also quite correctly, it's early. We have other kinds of information other than the commercial imagery. But, you know, look, the president spent hours with Kim Jong-un in Hanoi trying to reach the right deal with him. We know what that looks like. It's denuclearization by North Korea in exchange for a very bright economic future. The North Koreans weren't there. We're obviously going to watch what they do, but that's what the president's trying to get to.
If they are reassembling, will they use it right away, or can they use it right away?
Well, I don't think we really are in a position to say at this stage. Obviously, we have a lot of ways of getting information. We're going to study this situation carefully. As the president said, it would be very, very disappointing if they were taking this direction.
John, I heard that there was a last-minute push by Kim Jong-un to keep you guys at the table. How would you characterize what he tried to do when it was clear you were walking out?
Well, I don't think there was any last-minute push. There were extensive discussions. I think the president made our position very clear. Kim Jong-un had presented a formula that the North Koreans have tried before. It was unsatisfactory. You know, what they'd like is relief from the economic sanctions.
Sure.
And compliance with what we want, which is full denuclearization, comes later. That's been a path prior North Korean regimes have used to get a lifeline for their economy.
So there was none at the end. Hey, don't go anywhere. What about this? There was no last nuance to their offer.
Not that I saw, that's for sure.
John, there was some serious reporting that said that the two sides were far apart even before the president left the United States, and he felt like he would be able to persuade Chairman Kim, given his personal relationship. Is that accurate?
Well, I think the North Koreans obviously would like to give up as little of their nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons and ballistic missile programs as they could in exchange for very broad sanctions relief. And that's basically what they asked for. The president wasn't buying it. He said, look, we want a big deal. We want the big deal that will give North Korea a bright future, but which results in complete denuclearization. So the president's obviously open to talking again. We'll see when that might be scheduled or how it would work out. But he thinks the deal is there if North Korea is prepared to look at the big picture.
Okay, we'll wait and see if there'll be a third summit. Let's go down to Venezuela. The vice president said he wants to revoke 77 visas that were held by or are held by officials in the Maduro government. The White House also threatening to impose sanctions on foreign banks that do business with the government of Venezuela. Tell us more about this.
Well, look, the Maduro...
He was the American who was held by Yemen for 18 months. And we're all glad he's out, John.
Look, it's a very emotional moment is the best way I can describe it. Whenever the president welcomes an American hostage back, and it was emotional yesterday, Danny Burch said, you know, how glad he was to be an American now that he was back on our soil. And this is the 20th hostage that President Trump has been able to get out of captivity without ever paying anything, unlike the Obama administration paying to get the Iranian hostage, some of the Iranian hostages released. The president also called Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed of the United Arab Emirates to thank him for the UAE's efforts to get Mr. Burch out. But with Mr. Burch, his son Ahmed there in the Oval Office, it was really, really great.
Now, John, don't complain about the weather. You could have been in here on the couch in air conditioning, but you chose to go to the White House. That was your decision, all right?
That's it. I'm ready for it.
All right, I hope so.
All right.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Glad to be with you.
All right, let's hand it over to Jill. You know,
policy that required us to report the number of civilian deaths caused by drones. Previously, intelligence officials had to publish an annual report on deadly airstrikes outside of war zones. Critics of the Obama-era policy said it interfered with counterterrorism efforts. Facebook wants to make its site a little less social. CEO Mark Zuckerberg says the company is focusing more on private conversations and less on publicly shared posts.